Here in the viewfinder and monitor section, we're going to take a look at some of the options and operations of viewing through the camera. So the camera has the electronic viewfinder as well as the LCD monitor on the back of the camera. There is an eye sensor that will automatically sense anything that is physically close to it and switch over to the EVF when it senses something close, assuming it is your face and your eye. So it'll automatically switch back and forth. Now there is a live view button over to the left that can be used for controlling this. Now normally this live view is turned on auto, which means the eye sensor is automatically switching back and forth between the two viewfinders there. When it is in that auto mode, by pressing that button, you can go from live view to the super control panel, at least on the back of the camera. If you want to turn that off, it becomes a manual switch to switch back and forth between the two viewfinder options. So it really depends on how you like your camera to work, if you want it to be automatic or manual in the switching. And this can be turned on and off when you go into the setup menu. And so if you don't like the way it is, you can go in and readjust this. Now, this is also one of those buttons that can be reprogrammed. This is pretty good, I would say, on what it is doing. And so I would probably leave it if you can find good use for it in that way. If not, yes, reprogram it as necessary. Next up, let's talk specifically about the viewfinder itself. And so it has gone up quite a bit in resolution from the previous model of the camera. The magnification, confusingly, is 1.4x to 1.65. And that depends on the way that you have the image projected inside. I'm going to show you there's some options there. You can have a smaller image, which has less information over it, less clutter, and I like less clutter. Or you can have a larger image, and I like larger images, but it has clutter. And so it's your choice. You get to either have smaller and clean or larger with a little bit of clutter. Your choice. We have different frame rates depending on what type of action you're shooting. 21 millimeter eye point, which means your eye needs to be 21 millimeters behind the viewfinder, which means it works pretty good with glasses, goggles, and other things like that. 100% coverage, which is what most cameras are these days. And it does have an anti-fogging coating, which means it's going to do quite well under kind of unusual atmospheric conditions in there. Now, the 5.7 million dot viewfinder on this ranks it pretty high. There's kind of like 5 standard viewfinders that have been used out there for the last 3, 4, 5 years, and this is just one step down from the top. Generally speaking, most people don't notice the difference between one step and the next step, but if you go 2 steps, which is actually what this has come up as 2 steps, it becomes a little bit more of a notable difference. And so it is a pretty good quality viewfinder in there. There is a diopter over on the side, and there is a removable eye cup, which can be handy because after years of use, sometimes that soft rubber can wear out. So that's the EP18 if you are looking to replace it. All right, let's dive into what you are actually looking at in the viewfinder. Now, as I mentioned, there are 2 different size images you can see in the viewfinder. Of the smaller size, there's style 1, which has a big blue down there at the bottom, which looks very pretty. I like the color blue, but I don't like strong colors in my viewfinder because it can sometimes throw off the way that you see other colors. And so I think style 2 is probably the better option for most people. And so that's the one that I like to use. And it's the cleanest way to see your image because all that technical information is down below it. Now you can, if you want, shoot in style 3, which actually fills the entire frame with an image, but that doesn't leave any space for technical information, and so it just goes over your image. And so it depends on whether you want a clean image or a large image, and I could understand why you might want either one of those. And this can be chosen in the EVF style in the custom menu. Now, if you do have it on that larger size, if you want to declutter your image, you would press the info button, and so it will toggle you back and forth between straight image and image with information. I think most people are probably going to be going for the smaller image, but that's just my guess. Next up, focus frame. Obviously, there's lots of different focusing frames, different colors, different shapes. You'll see those in the viewfinder as well as on the monitor as well. Your key exposure information is going to be right there at the kind of the middle bottom of the frame. Your shutter speeds, apertures, and so forth. That's things that you're, of course, going to be keeping a close eye on. Now there is lots of other information going on in there. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these in detail. A lot of it's fairly obvious, but the reason it's in there is because this is pretty important stuff and can affect how your camera is working in various different modes that it's in. It's kind of things that you want to check on a regular basis. So take a look through your camera right now. See what's turned on, see what's turned off, how much battery life is left, how many pictures are left, and kind of get used to what this navigation is showing you as to what's going on. And then from time to time, just occasionally, take a look down there, see if there's anything out of place. It'll remind you that, oh, I've left my camera in the Pro Capture mode or something like that, because key things are going to be noted right in there for you to see. All right, there is other information that will overlay itself onto the screen. You can show the histogram, graphical display of all the exposure information. You can see the highlights and shadows. There is extra battery information if you have the vertical battery grip. And there's a level gauge, which helps tell you if you are pointing the camera up and down or tilting it from side to side. Now, all of this can be customized and controlled in the custom menu. You can go in and choose information 1, 2, and 3, and you can customize with checkboxes which information you see when that is pulled up. And this allows you to see one thing or two things or three things all on one screen set, or not at all. And so you really do get a lot of customization in there. Next up are grids. I love grids because they help compose, they help make sure you have straight lines, straight horizons, find the center of the frame, know how things are going to get cropped later on. These are really nice grids because they can be different colors depending on what color your background is, and they can be different opacities depending on how intrusive you want them to be. And so these are things that can all be controlled in the custom menu, choosing what type of grid settings you're going to use. And you can have a preset of 1 and 2, so it's quick to change from two different common ones that you're using on a regular basis. Now, a common little symbol that you're going to see, this little one right down here, and it kind of looks like a rectangle with a bunch of dots down there on the bottom. And what that is referring to is the viewfinder. It's supposed to be the viewfinder with technical information down there at the bottom. And what it means is that it applies only to the viewfinder. So there are grid settings for the whole camera, which means they'll show up in both places. But if you just want them to show up in the viewfinder and not on the LCD monitor on the back of the camera, you can customize it in that manner. So just be aware for all of those little custom viewfinder icons because they're applying to just the viewfinder. The frames per second. So you are watching a tiny little TV monitor in the viewfinder, and the frames per second that it is projected at can vary from 60 to 120 frames per second. Now, for normal handheld photography, 60 frames per second is going to be perfectly fine and adequate. If you're working from a tripod, 60 frames per second is going to be perfectly fine. 120 frames per second is good when you are tracking action. So if you are doing birds in flight, fast action, sports, panning the camera left and right, that is where you might see a benefit of going to 120 frames per second. So you can go into the custom menu and adjust your frame rate according to what your needs. Setting it at a faster frame rate unnecessarily is going to make, let's say you do a lot of landscape photography, and putting it into 120 frames per second, what's it going to do for you? Your viewing experience is not going to be any worse, but your battery life will. And so that's kind of the compromise that you're playing with. The brightness and color of the viewfinder is not something you are likely to need to change, but if you do need to adjust it, if it drifts in time after many years of use, you can go in and you can adjust it in here if necessary. All right, we've talked about this monitor button on the back of the camera where it changes from the EVF to the LCD, depending on how you have it set up. There is a little shortcut though, that you can turn it on and off by holding down on that button. So let me just quickly show you how this works here. So if we just press this button here, this goes to the Super Control Panel, shortcut to a lot of common features, and then back here. If we hold it down, we get automatically to this menu setting that we'll find later on in the menu. If we want to turn off the auto switch, we can turn it off here. And so now this little sensor doesn't change back and forth. It changes from the viewfinder to the monitor and back and forth. And if I want to reprogram it again, hold it down for a second, we'll turn the auto switch back on. And so now when anything obstructs this little sensor here, it automatically switches to the viewfinder up there. All right, looking to the back of the camera, the LCD monitor back there, we have pretty good resolution in there. We have this nice fully articulated touchscreen that flips out, flips forward, good for vlogging, good for a wide variety of low angle, high angle uses, pretty common on cameras these days. Now the touchscreen on this is not fully encasing in everything the camera does. And so these are basic gestures that you can use. You can swipe, you can double tap to zoom in. You can use this for live view, playback, quick menu. You can use it for a lot of different aspects on the camera itself. Now, if you want to use it for focusing, you can. And there's going to be some basic symbols that you'll see on there. Let's go ahead and give you a little tour of what some of these options are. And here we're going to take a little focusing target. All right, so on here, let's turn a little information on so we can see this little symbol down here. And so we can see that we have the camera, we have nothing, so that means when you touch the screen, nothing happens. And the green focusing box, which allows us to set a focusing point, and the camera will focus there. It will not shoot a photo, it will just simply focus there. If we turn this to the camera, it'll focus and shoot a photo. So it depends on whether you want it to do anything, or focus, or shoot a photo. And so these are things that you can also control in the menu itself, but you can do it right there on screen if you want to. And so when you are using the monitor on the back of the camera, that live view button will switch back and forth between the super control panel and the image, as we've said before. When it is in the image mode though, you can use the info button to switch back and forth between information and no information, depending on whether you want just a good clean look at your shot or you need technical information. A final point to know about the viewfinder and monitor is the brightness of the image that you're looking at is affected by something called the live view mode in the custom menu. If you would like it to mimic your real exposure, the preview of what your final exposure is going to look like, this is the standard option in the live view mode. And this is where you change shutter speeds up and down, for instance, as in the example you see here on screen, and the image goes up and down in brightness exactly as your exposure would. And this is going to be handy in most situations where you would like to get a preview of the final exposure. But in other cases, you just want a standard clear view of what you're focusing on, and you use the exposure indicator to determine whether you are overexposed or underexposed. And that option is called the SOVF, or the Simulated Optical Viewfinder. They're simulating what an SLR looks like when you look through the viewfinder, and everything is always kind of evenly exposed because you're looking through a prism and mirror system. Well, it kind of mimics that here by giving you a good image the whole time. Now, the SOVF would be a perfect option when you are in the studio with flashes, or anytime you're using flash for that instance, or anytime you just want to have an even exposure of what you're looking at, and you're going to be using the exposure indicator rather than the image that you're looking at for determining exposure needs. So I think standard's going to be good for most people, and then the SOVF option will be good for people using flash and kind of some special circumstances. And so that's an important one that we'll talk about again when it comes to the custom menu. So there you go, folks. Those are your options in the viewfinder and monitor. Time for you to adjust and get them set the way you like them.